councillors, since the regional councillor here, I've invited them to come up and we'll go on to item 9 and then go back to the rest of the GM report afterwards, if that's okay. So it's page 67, which is just a placeholder anyway. So it's a verbal update from Andrew and Mike. We've met you before, so we don't need any more introductions unless anyone specially wants one. I don't know. It's a long report, Gary. I think we'll ask you questions on it to see if you've actually read it. Okay, Andrew or Mike, over to you guys. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you very much, councillor. So this is just part of a regular update back into this committee. So we just talk about what's happening in the public transport space. So just a quick update about some service improvements that will go live in January for Rototuna Flagstaff area, patronage, how that's tracking for the city, an update around some technology improvements we're putting in, so real-time passenger information and ticketing, and a brief update around where our LTP process is at. So for the service improvements for Rototuna Flagstaff area, earlier this year we went out with quite a big public exercise asking residents what would they want from improved services. So that feedback has been put into the process, and we've come up with some options. The options have been back out and refined with some public feedback as well. So we're ready to go live, and these are the options we'll go live with in January. So there's a new route for Flagstaff. It's a little bit hard to see. On the top of the page is the Rototuna High School. Bottom of the slide is the CBD. So the new route we're calling the Rototuna Circular. It operates 7 days per week, including public holidays. Travels in both directions. It's kind of like a mini orbiter route in a way. So this was in response to public feedback around looking for connections within the Rototuna Flagstaff area. So not necessarily there's strong demand for just travel within the area as opposed to outside of the area. There's other options for travelling outside of the area as well. Sorry,
Andrew, I've got Mark, did you want to ask a question on this particular thing? Okay, no, we'll leave it. Yeah, sure. Sorry, Andrew.
Yeah, no worries. And it also provides or anticipates a connection for Kimbray Drive being in place, and it'll have services running past the high school in the north. So this particular one's been landing really well with the vast majority of all respondents up north, so expecting good things. So it connects in with Chartwell and travels in both directions, but it will have peak sort of express services back to the CBD during weekdays at peak times. So another change we're making is the Rototuna West route. So go to operating 7 days a week, provides a really quite direct connection to the CBD, and also has school time trips up to the high school. So the high schools will be really well connected in. Also provides some services for Huntington South, north up into the school area as well. Flagstaff route, going to operate 7 days a week. One of the key points of feedback from the public in the area was they were looking for express services to the CBD. So we can deliver this at peak times with this route, so to pick up the Flagstaff catchment, and at peak times provide an express service down River Road into the CBD. Off peak it'll travel via Chartwell and through that area. The school assist route is changing, so we're pushing that further north into the Borman sort of catchment area. And really what this service does is it relieves capacity on the orbiter and a number of other routes to free that up for commuters. We put this service on, I think, beginning of last year, and it's at capacity now, so looking at some additional capacity improvements to that as well. Huntington South gets an all-day service that'll operate 7 days a week, connecting back towards Chartwell. And when we combine it all together, it looks something like that, but I appreciate that's a little bit hard to see on the slide. Any questions in relation
Andrew,
to
just on the capacity that you've reached, I was going to ask before, are you looking at putting any double-decker buses on in any of these routes or any of the other ones that are at capacity?
Yeah, so we've probably our number one route that struggles with capacity at peak times at the moment is the Orbiter. So we've got 2 double-decker vehicles coming into the fleet, should be in place by February, March next year and operating, and that's just to relieve peak time capacity. There's also additional capacity going on in addition to that for the orbiter route, and some additional capacity on some other key routes as well. So peak time capacity is a challenge across 4 or 5 routes that really struggle at the moment, but our plans underway to relieve that pressure.
So those couple of people that I've heard recently talking about seeing only 3 people on the bus are just looking at the wrong time.
I'd say so.
Yeah, thanks. Mark, sorry.
Just a general question. What's the rules around when you're route planning regarding the disability sector? Like, do you have to have bus stops within a certain range of...
Yeah, so in the PT plan we have a policy at the moment where we aim to have a bus route within 600 metres of all properties. So we're currently at about 98% of all properties within 600 metres of a bus route. With the service improvements in January, that'll nudge a bit north of that.
Of all residential properties?
Yeah, of all residential properties. There's a couple of spots throughout the city that are not covered, but quite difficult to cover. The other aspect to disability access is the fleet itself, so ensuring all buses are low floor, wheelchair accessible and the like, which we're at 100% for all the Hamilton vehicles at the moment, and certainly any new vehicles we bring in meet those requirements as well.
And is there a move to get bike racks on the front of all buses? I know there's some on the Raglan buses.
Yeah, so on our satellite services, we certainly have bike racks on the buses. We've been hesitant to include them on the urban services because they can have an impact in terms of runtime. And the other challenge is if travelling with bike racks on buses is accessible, it creates a problem for us as well. So the maximum we can fit on any one bus at a time is 2 bikes. So if we have a number of people waiting and wanting to do it, can create a challenge. But I think through the Access Hamilton and the mass transit plan, we'd prefer to probably look at options where we have kind of a park and ride type of facilities for bikes. So park your bike securely, then travel on the bus is probably a better solution for Hamilton.
And is there still demand for pram racks, for pushchair racks?
Yeah, pushchair. So we've gone, all the new vehicles coming into the fleet, we make sure that they've got 2 what we call priority area seating spaces on the bus. So these spaces are for wheelchairs, but also prams and pushchairs. So increasing that from 1 to 2 spaces, and that means you can come on board with a pram and don't necessarily need to fold it. So very popular actually, those spaces on the buses.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks. Gary.
Thank you. You talked about express services. I know express means that you don't stop very often. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of those, particularly for the Flagstaff area, at peak times, the route won't go via Chartwell and won't go down Peach Grove through that area. It'll just go down River Road, which should have much fewer stops compared to the alternative and be a much more direct route for that component of it. Yeah. So really targeting.
So these are planned or these have been done?
These go live in January.
Okay.
Yeah.
So will you expect the express, you'll obviously, some people won't be able to get picked up, so the express one could possibly be not full, is it? What happens?
Yeah, I think it'll be targeting a different market. So with the express, it's really at peak time, so it's targeting commuters into the CBD. All other times the services will run via Chartwell in this particular example. During the express periods, there's other services that will pick up the route that it's not on, if that makes sense. So we're confident we'd still be catering for both markets.
Okay. So presumably the express bus will go past some bus shelters with people in it.
So it'll travel down, for this particular example, it'll travel down River Road, which by default has fewer stops than the alternative route. It's normal route through off-peak periods. Yeah.
Go right past your place, Gary, while you're waiting for it.
I'm always waiting for buses.
Yeah, we'll notice. Paula, thanks.
I've completely forgotten what my question was. No, it's fine. I'll come back to it. Sorry.
Yeah, Andrew, you've got more, eh?
Yes.
Yep.
So just very quickly have some information around how patronage is trending. So over the last... So over 12 months to date, there's been about 3.5 million boardings on Hamilton services. We've recently done a stock take of our ticketing system and active cards, unique cards. So there's There's about 40,000 active users over the last 12 months. They're not all regular users, but unique users within the city. So 12-month to date, patronage has declined by 1%, but that's actually a significant improvement from where we've been minus 6%. So patronage is tracking up reasonably well. And when we look at the past 6 months, it's up 1%. And as these service improvements go live, double deckers relieving capacity, would expect that number to keep heading north quite strongly as well. Real-time and ticketing. So we launched the real-time app and street displays recently. We're currently at about 5,000 app downloads, but we haven't pushed it too hard in terms of marketing. We're still resolving a number of bugs, so we're accurately tracking about 80% of trips at the moment, and our target's to be up over 98%. So when we get over the 90s, we'll start really pushing that from a marketing perspective. We'd expect those active users to go up quite a bit. A new ticketing system, just a brief update, that will be implemented first half of next year, and there's a lot of passenger benefits that come with that. So online top-up facilities, tag on, tag off, also comes with simplified fare structure and products for passengers. So again, we'd expect that to have a pretty positive impact on patronage and uptake of services as well. Any questions in relation to those items?
Paula?
To my question related to sorry. Mark brought it to mind around the disability, because I've been aware that the fleet's been able to, in good shape. The fleet's in good shape. Question is really just how we are progressing on the infrastructure to assist with disabled people getting on and off the bus. The curbing, the removing the seats at bus stops, all of those kind of things that have been identified as making it easier for people with disabilities to use the overall service. How is that side of things tracking? And maybe you can't answer it all today, Chris, but it would be good to find out, because we do take some responsibility for that infrastructure. We take the responsibility for that infrastructure.
Part of the answer to that might be in your deliberations on the transport improvement program that's coming before council over the next couple of days. So part of that is some increased funding to deal with some of that. So we've always had a program to deal with accessibility in terms of at our bus stops, but the funding that we get would probably allow some acceleration of that. Robin, are you able to add to that? Or?
So the funding that we have currently allows us to deliver each year approximately 12 new shelters, and we generally do 12 new accessible acoustic curbs as well. So as Chris outlined, we're certainly looking to increase that in the next LTP.
That would be good. I'd love to get some information at some stage about at 12 a year at that pace, or at a bigger pace, how long would it take to get through sizable parts of the network? I'm assuming also that the new routes that look fantastic that you had up on there, that as those new routes are developed, they are fully accessible at those bus stops. Yes, no,
I think we worked out it would take 30 to 40 years to get them to all bus stops. And that we worked that out in the last council.
Yeah, well,
so that's why there's an accelerated one under Access Hamilton being proposed.
So through you, Mr. Chair, if I could have some updated information on that in terms of how it will influence our discussion tomorrow. And did you answer my question about the new routes with the new bus stops? And they'll all have Kirsty Curb. They'll all have somewhere for people with.
Robin, you might come down to the front just in case there's other issues. It's hard with you being behind half the people. The new routes and the accessibility issues with it.
So no, the new routes don't automatically get accessible curbs. We've still only got the funding for the 12 sites. So basically what we're doing is having to prioritise based on the type of users that we have. So we work with the regional council and we work with CCS Disability to prioritise where we're putting those accessible curbs. But new stops generally literally just have a sign put in and some road marking. and then we'll be monitoring to see how well they go before we actually put some infrastructure in there.
Robin, are we not on that? Are we not able? And I thought this had been raised at the previous district plan discussions to require through our development manual all but new bus stops and new areas to have the raised curbs.
Where we can plan for that, so we on arterial routes where, and Rotorua, for example, is where we're working with the developer there. Yes, we are doing that. But a lot of the new routes that we have been developing with the regional council are in existing residential, those sorts of things, and we don't always know exactly where the buses are going to go, so we can't preempt that. That's something that we're wanting to work on closer in the future, so that we can have a better idea where those bus stops are and preempt at least the accessible curb and a pad, a solid concrete
to
pad.
Save retrofitting expense.
Yeah, well, that's right. That would be ideal to do it as you went. But that's commentary. Just one further question around that then. If a development, say at Rotorua, includes a retirement village or a special care type accommodation, you would put the accessible curbing and shelter and seat there. So would we? Do we?
No, not necessarily.
Because there's no budget, or why?
Yeah, because basically we come up with a program, and then it depends on the timing of when those when those new, aged care facilities do start up. We're trying, as I said, to work with developers. So Kimbray Drive, for example, which is one that's being extended through. We've worked with the developer at that time of an unusual situation. We knew that the aged facility was going in ahead of the road being extended, so we've been able to include bus stop facilities, but there won't be bus shelters there because that would be council's funding at this stage. So plenty of room for improvement.
Okay, I might have a comment on that comment time, but I think you could probably have a guess at what I'm going to say there, but yeah, okay, thank you.
Well, one of the things that Access Hamilton proposal has tried to do is allow for a much greater investment in that sort of facility over the next 10 years, because we know we're not getting ahead of the 8 ball. Sorry, Gary.
Thank you. Robin, just with regard to that specific issue we're talking about now, and I think you alluded to it earlier on, or one of you guys, not you, Mike, because you haven't spoken yet, but surely you'd want to make sure that there was demand for those services when we've got limited resources for these things. Okay, so we haven't got zillions of dollars, so we can't whack these things up everywhere. You'd want to make sure there was demand for those disability type services before you'd put the money into them, wouldn't you?
So yes, we can make educated guesses where the facilities are close to an.
But you can
aged
actually
facility.
find out. I mean, bus starts arriving, and there's a whole lot of people who say, "Look, I just can't get on the bus because I can't get my wheelchair on." Whatever it is they're doing,
yes.
You don't even have to make an educated guess. You could probably wait 6 months. Okay, we do need to put one in there. That site has proven it is required there, as opposed to possibly putting them in all around the place, and half of you wasting your money on sites where very few disabled people are accessing the.
Yes, I think it's worth noting it's not only disabled people, but it's people who may have just some difficulty.
Yeah.
But also
Well, that's disabled, isn't it?
parents with pushchairs and those sorts of things. Even if people are wanting to sneak a bike on occasion.
I guess I just contrasted to what Paula was saying about the necessity.
Hang on. Just want to know the cost of retrofitting a Kirsty curb versus the cost of having it built from scratch as part of the roadside architecture.
I wouldn't be able to, off the top of my head, we've got a budget of about 110 that allows for shelters at about 7,000.
Could we have some figures on that maybe for tomorrow? Just supplied. Yeah, sorry, Gary. Back to you.
Yeah, well, you're right. You're quite right. If the cost of a Kirsty curb is no different than a standard one, then go ahead and do it. But if the cost of a Kirsty curb is twice the price, you'd want to make sure it was worthwhile putting it in there before you did, wouldn't you? Anyway, that's another point. Patronage dropped 1% over the last year. that's against a rising population, eh? So in actual fact, the percentage of people who are accessing the buses is slightly, bit by bit dropping, is that right?
Yeah, short answer is yes. But I guess the note there is, it wasn't that long ago we were looking at a year-on-year decline of around up to 6%. So the numbers are heading up, and my strong view, famous last words.
They're not heading up.
My famous last words, but I think over the next year we'll see positive year-on-year numbers in terms of growth. And our target in terms of planning is growth benchmark back to population growth, so targeting a percentage that's above our background population growth.
Because at the moment, if it was against population growth, that 1% could have been 2% drop, couldn't it? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And with regard to your app, have you consulted with the DHB about implementing new apps?
No, not directly, not on this specific issue.
That would be a bad move, Gary.
I think so, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Keep next.
Cool. So the next item I think Michael talked to, which relates to LTPs. We seem to be frozen.
I just just wanted to update.
The app's not working. No.
No, I think your data show's not working. Just in terms of our LTP, so our draft budgets make provision for growth, so extending services as where the city's growing, also increasing our service provision. As congestion is increasing, we need to increase our service to maintain the service reliability. But the other key part of our LTP makes provision for funding for the mass transit plan, so that's a key part of the Access Hamilton strategy. And so we've made assumptions with respect to year 3 of increased service provision. But just wanted to note, look, that's very much dependent on the mass transit plan and also the HCC infrastructure PT priority measures, so they come hand in hand. So look, that piece of work's been quite collaborative in terms of the regional council being involved as Access Hamilton has developed. We've taken that business case to our council, and just really noting that decisions, they really need to be joint decisions with respect to infrastructure and PT provision service. So our council has budget discussions on the 13th of December, and we'll confirm our budgets on the 31st of January. And so we'll obviously link back in terms of decision this council makes with respect to infrastructure provision.
Any questions on that aspect? No. Okay, is that it, Mike?
That's it, yep.
Andrew? Well, thanks very much. Are there any other questions or comments on the public transport report? Just remind councillors that up until about 2010, we'd had growth well ahead of population growth of patronage since about 2001, I think. And in the last 6 years up until about 6 months ago, it had been tailing off quite significantly, but with new services and new management, under new management sign out, it seems to have reversed the trend for the last few years. So I, for one, am quite pleased with that. I think we should be trying to get back to the 10 to 15% annual growth that we had before. We were the leading, in terms of growth, council in the country for those quite a few years. We were the leading 2003 to 10. So thanks very much for coming along. Sorry, Leo, you've got... Oh, sorry, Leo, I didn't notice it come on. Right. My apologies.
Andrew, do you do any breakdown of the patronage figures, weekends versus Mondays till Fridays?
Yeah, we absolutely do, and we can break it down right down to a trip level if need be. But by way of summary, about half of all our patronage occurs at peak times, and then the other half is during off-peak periods.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's the same old problem, mate. Yeah. Sorry. Any more? Is that it, Leah? Yep. Sorry, I was checking that you'd finished. Yep. Yep.
No, that's all right.
Well, the only item, the only resolution is that we receive the report from the Regional Council, which I'll move and Leo seconded. Did you want to speak to that?
Just to make the comment so that it is on the record that I support, and I think you're in agreement with me, that proactively rolling out more accessible infrastructure is preferable to waiting until it's all in place and then trying to retrofit it. And I think we need to have a very close look at that. And the reason I do want to mention it is because you're quite right, we're making a whole raft of decisions in the next couple of days at Council that will impact upon these matters. I'd like to see us be a council that's proactive at creating a really easy to use and accessible public transport system. And it's for those people who recognise themselves to have disabilities, but as you say, it's anybody who's transport disadvantaged, temporarily or more long term. And we do know that we've got an ageing population. We've talked about this many times, so we know we're going to have more mobility issues as time goes on. Jerry Pomeroy has been a tireless advocate in this area. And at every chance she gets, he pushes to make us the leaders in the country in terms of the accessibility. And I'd like to just encourage councillors in our discussions tomorrow to consider that when that item comes up in terms of what we can achieve. I certainly think that anywhere a new retirement village or a hospital type facility goes in, the very minimum should be a Kirsty curb and a seat, but preferably a shelter, because older people do need to sit down and wait for the bus, and they do need to be protected from the elements. That's not one at every single bus stop around the city, but that's being thoughtful and caring about how we develop this program going forward.
I think actually Paula raises a good point, and I think tied in with our planning requirements, we don't have enough hooks in our planning requirements to ensure that things are built at the start when they're needed. I mean, we don't see that schools and hospitals and things like that have inbuilt public transport facilities and friendly for disabilities, and that's been quite an issue for quite a while, which means the rest of the ratepayers in the city have to fund across the board rather than the development itself. So we need to get our district plan and our development manuals totally up to speed on that. Otherwise, it's going to continue to be a slow-moving thing. We're not going to get the disability curbs in the places we need them anywhere near soon enough if we don't start getting other parties contributing to producing them as well. Is there any other comments people like to make before we put the resolution, which moved by me, seconded by Leo? Okay, raise your hands for those in favour, against, carried, thanks. Thanks very much. So we're back to the GM's report. We've got Kelvin's coming down to the table at the end there to talk about his items, and that's page 40. And the first item, Kelvin, is, sorry, it's the growth related, growth indicator report.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning.
It's page 45, is it right?
No, page 40 on mine, sorry, Gary, down the bottom, paragraph 4. Sorry? The attachment. Yeah, sorry, Gary.
Morning, thank you, Chairman. Morning, councillors. So, very brief, this is our usual quarterly indicator on numbers. You'll see we've put two together. One is the market indicator around housing, and does include, Councillor Southgate, some of the queries you've asked around market indication and sectors by market in terms of pricing, and what it does show is that there is a large market under the medium house price. I know that's been a question of late, so we have included that data. And then we've done a second report around the industrial area as well. So these are the things we put out quarterly. They started probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. We were publishing them. We don't publish them now. We simply send them out on an email database. They're a part of the Hamilton Invest website. And they're picked up by different real estate agents, developers, economic development reasons. They're used by various groups around the city, and they have been well received, and they do give us good numbers. So if there's any questions, I'll take them now.
Rob, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My first question is on page 49, which is attachment 2 on the growth indicator report. You mentioned there about new residential sections and unit titles. Can you just give me a quick definition as to what the differences are between the two? Is a unit title related to a licence to occupy?
So unit title would, sorry, I'll come back to the first one. So the title, it's 22C is when you actually become a development contribution, so on a residential area. Then a unit title can be where on any one section you may have more than one unit, or an apartment, for example, there's different unit titles within.
So it's like a cross lease rather
Correct.
than a fee. Okay. So it's not.
It's not always one for one. I guess
it isn't where somebody might establish a retirement village, which might have 50 licences to occupy on. If you take perhaps the Hilda Ross one, where there are multi-units on that one site with licences rather than freehold titles.
Yeah, so unit title is a legal title and legal right to occupy, and generally in this situation with an apartment building, there's a unit title for a particular area, but also the unit title gives access to common areas as well. So effectively, you can buy and sell unit titles, but you're not actually owning the entire building, you're just owning your share of the common areas.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is around what's in that report. Between January and October 2017, you've got there 988 new dwellings for 10 months. If we add together the 698 and the 234 titles, is that suggesting that we're not meeting the housing accord targets? If 988 for 10 months, I guess if we gross that up for the remaining 2 months.
Sorry, Carol.
Yeah. Is it suggesting that we're struggling to meet our housing accord targets?
So our housing targets for this year are 1,300, and we're on target for that, and we'll bring that through. So remembering that sections
are we talking about a calendar year or a financial year?
Calendar year.
Okay.
And what you'll see is what we are seeing, and if you go to the consent, you'll see that we're seeing more and more apartment type and duplex type dwellings. So even though there may be less sections, the dwelling numbers are the unit numbers as a total, because you can have one section with more than one dwelling on it, for example, units times. So we should be hitting those targets pretty close to 1,300 this year. That's what our indications are. Whether we'll get to, with the softening of the market, into the 1,400 for the next year and then the 1,700 the year after that. Those are the targets under the housing accord. In terms of our targets for the dwelling requirements to meet our growth as it is now, we're going to hit those numbers easily.
So an apartment is not a unit title?
Yes, so, sorry. So
it is. Yeah. But adding those together at 988, you're confident that we will have 312.
Yep. So
almost a third of what we took 10 months to do. We'll do that in 2 months.
His explanation was some of the sections will have more than one dwelling.
Correct. Yeah. So into the future, you've got one section now, but then
isn't
it may
that
be sold.
one unit title or?
Currently, but then it could be divided into two. So when you put a duplex on
could be one
and then it could be split.
Unit title with 2 dwellings
Correct.
on it.
So there's a lag to that.
Okay.
No,
so the answer to your question is you're quite confident that we will get those 1,300.
Correct. And when you see at the moment the forecasting, particularly, I know the graph's a little bit hard to see because of the decrease in size for the print material, but it does get us to around the 1,200 mark for this year. So again, we may be stretching to hit the housing accord numbers, but that's where the SHAs come into play, because we've always said that would supplement those numbers above what our requirements are for the demand to meet our growth numbers.
Okay. Thank you.
No, good.
Sorry, Gary.
Thank you. On page 60, under key findings, you highlight that Hamilton's economy grew by 3.3%, which is outstanding. That's better than the rest of the, better than the average of the rest of the country by the sounds of things. But even though our economy grew by 3.3%, our rates went up by 3.8%. Just highlighting that.
Very good.
So that would suggest that even in a booming time, the City Council still took more than the city grew. That would be, I'd be right in saying that, wouldn't I?
I would suggest that the numbers.
Well, am
speak
I or
for
not?
themselves.
Gary, you're really entering in debate we should be having
I'm not,
tomorrow.
I'm asking you a question.
No.
A very clear question.
He's confirmed that the
Yeah.
fact figures are correct.
Yep.
So the debate
So,
goes
okay, so
tomorrow.
the, our rates are going up by greater than our economy is growing up. Secondly, the 1, 2, 3, fourth bullet point down, traffic flows in Hamilton climbed by 2.5%. Just, can you, traffic flows is a term I'm not familiar with. What does that mean?
I might have to go to my colleague.
It'll just be the car count. We measure it on
All vehicles, like buses, cars,
all
bikes,
vehicles.
every form
all-
of traffic? Or
motorised vehicles.
motorised vehicles,
Yeah.
okay. So, sorry, I don't know how much our, is that about, our population wouldn't have grown by 2.5%, would it, over a year?
Our population growth recently is just under 2%.
Correct. Yep.
Around
So
so-
between 3,600 and 4,000 a year has been our last 2 years' growth.
But I guess I'm just trying to get relativity.
Yeah.
So our traffic flows are growing quicker or faster than our population growth is.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
And that's all forms of motorised transport.
Correct, because that would include traffic moving through for economic purposes as well. It's not just the.
So it's not just to
growth.
do with our residents?
No,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
all traffic.
All right,
Yep.
that's a good point to put on. And this one I find quite startling. So it's 1, 2, can you please put numbers beside these instead of bloody bullet points? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Eighth one down. Vehicle registrations in Hamilton increased by 11%. That's over a year.
Yep, that's right.
So our
that's,
vehicle fleet increased by 11% in a year.
That's right. So
Heavens,
that's more of an indication of what's happening within your own city
Yeah,
as well.
well, pardon?
That's more of an indication about what's happening within the city
Yeah.
itself in terms of growth around vehicle, and then you translate that to the vehicle movements. Absolutely.
So, and so I'm just trying to figure this out. Does that mean that whilst traffic flows are only up 2.5%?
Because that's all traffic moving through, so you're basing it from a high level anyway.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
gotcha. Okay,
Yep.
so it's not right to compare those two,
No,
really.
they don't have a direct
But that-
correlation.
yeah, that's although it does say the national increase is nearly 10%, it's 9.5. So
Yep. So again,
we're a nation of cars, aren't we?
we're a nation of traffic, I guess is what you're saying.
Well, what are those things? The things that you register are motorised vehicles, aren't they? Motorised vehicles. You don't register a push bike or a skateboard.
No, that's correct.
So it's trucks, cars,
Caravans,
motorbikes,
Caravans,
caravans,
trailers,
boats. It's not. Is it boats and things like that?
trailers, the trailers, but
Trailers,
not the,
okay,
not,
all
the,
right.
not the boat itself.
All right. So what does that sort of tell us in terms of our efforts to get people out of cars and onto bikes? And this is a serious question because I mean it's something we've been the majority of councils been trying to do for 20 years now. Are we peeing into the wind?
I'm not sure I can answer that
Spitting
question.
into the wind?
Maybe we'll talk to Christopher might be able to answer that.
I guess that's at the heart of our Access Hamilton strategy. So what we do know, and those figures are just stating that we have a very high, we're an outlier in the number of single occupancy motor vehicles in Hamilton. So we've got the highest proportion of all the cities of one person in a car driving around the city. So our Access Hamilton strategy is trying to gaze into the future and say, well, how do we arrest that statistic? How do we get people onto public transport? How do we get them onto buses? And if we just continue down that path, we're just going to get more and more congested.
But Chris, does it suggest that we're going against what our population wants? So our people are clearly, hang on, Dave, despite all, I know you don't want to hear this, despite all of the work we've done and the money we've spent and the education and all that sort of stuff, I think our population's just gone like that to us, hasn't it?
There's plenty of different ways to talk about
Hang on, Dave, I'm asking you a question, you don't quite like it, but can I just have an answer from Kelvin?
First, I expect
Okay,
you to...
you're going to decide what's a question, what's not a question, are you?
No, I expect you to actually be polite to people, not to put words in their mouths like you've been doing, not to berate people and interrupt them when they're talking. As chair, I am entitled to run the debate, okay, and the discussion. Now, this is a question time. You're entering into debate.
It is not. I am asking questions.
Let me finish. That's one of the other things you would know from reading standing orders, that you don't interrupt the chair. You're trying to debate issues with staff. I am more than happy to have a debate at the end where you can say your views on the statistics. I'm not trying to argue with you. It is totally irrelevant whether I would like or not like to hear what you have to say, and you need to stop making that sort of comment when the chair is asking you to hang tie-ho for a bit. You're asking staff you're trying to get them in a debate. That's not the place for this. It's to ask them questions about the statistics, not about the interpretation of it, which you are now debating with them.
Sorry, what you just said then was nonsense. I've been asking questions, and there are some facts being provided to us. I'm trying to get context around the facts. I'm trying to say what these facts tell us, and to me it's quite clear that, so I'm asking, so if our number of vehicles registered has gone up by 11%, which is astounding, I would never have thought that. This is the first time I've noticed this. Maybe it's been in this report, but it's the first time I've noticed it. It would suggest to me, so I'm still asking, are our policy, and this is really fundamental to what we do and where we spend millions of other people's money, millions and millions of other people's money, is what we're doing contrary to what our community wants? Yeah, why is it that these things are, despite
Gary,
all the stuff we've done?
Gary,
so I'm asking you a question,
Gary,
David.
And that question is for a debate tomorrow.
No, it's not. It is trying to get clarity about what this is telling us. What is the point of getting a staff report if we don't listen to what it tells us?
Gary, I'm not prepared to have that sort of debate about a set of facts that have been presented to us by staff at our request at this meeting. You can ask questions about the facts, not the interpretation. I've said that twice now. I don't know how many more times that you want me to say it, but I'm not prepared for us to have that debate here. Tomorrow is the debate on the budget, where we're going to discuss the Access Hamilton proposals to address these sorts of issues. And that is entirely legitimate to have that sort of debate. Should we be spending money? Is it in the right place? All of those sorts of things. Here, we've got a factual report presented to us by management, and we're asking questions of explanation of the facts, yes, but not debating whether we're doing the right, with our budgets, with our programs, are doing the right thing. That's for tomorrow.
I'm sorry, I respectfully, you're completely and utterly wrong. Our governance requirement...
Well, I might be wrong, but I'm in the chair. Okay, so we're having a discussion.
So you're scared of the answer to this question, so you're going to rule it out of...
Gary, I'm not even... Given that last comment, I'm taking you off the list and moving on to Paula. Paula?
Thank you. My question is around the information provided on page 53, please, Calvin, which... And I don't like to be nitpicky about the size of things, but I just have to make that comment again.
No, I agree.
I've got my glasses on.
Sorry, Paula, what page did you say?
53.
Thank you.
And I am trying to understand the graphs, but obviously they're tiny, even with my glasses on. So can you... one of the things I'm interested in, just the context, is there's the house price,
yes.
And it's now 500 and something, in the median house price, 500 and something, according to one of these.
Yes.
And then there's the ability for our citizens to afford to purchase a house, and I know there's a number of aspects we don't control. What is this like, for example, lending rates and mortgages and deposits and those kind of things, student loans even. But what is this paragraph in the middle trying to tell us about affordability? I couldn't quite, perhaps it's because I was struggling to read it. The graph showing us about Hamiltonians being able to afford to buy a house. Can you explain to me that?
Sorry, is that the third paragraph down?
The second and third paragraph of that housing affordability. Can you just give me the concise summary of what that's telling us?
Not concisely, no. It is the point that you make that there's a lot of... This is a new indicator that's been introduced recently by MB. Rather than try and fudge that here. I would like to go back and understand that more myself in terms of the data that sits behind that, so then I can come back to you all with a clearer answer. I don't want to try and
thank you. So through you, and then that's satisfactory. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I then ask then that this information be afforded to, or be brought to us in some kind of plain language alternative? So because I think this is pivotal to the conversation that we're having with the housing affordability and all of that.
Correct.
Special housing areas.
And if I may, that's the intent from the staff to try and give. That's questions that have come through this forum previously, and we keep trying to build the picture through this forum, through this tool, and it is a well-received tool. So I take your point about the clarity of the language. And
so it needs to come back to us in the next couple of days. Through
we
Mr.
can do
Chair.
that. Yeah, I can turn that around today.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks. If there's no other questions on that part of the report from page 40, paragraphs 4, 5 and 6 in the attached document, the next part for who's doing the, is Blair here?
Blair is here.
Okay. So we'll wait for that Blair to come. So we'll go on to, is there any more of yours?
No, I'm done.
Okay, thanks.
Not literally.
Strategic collaboration, paragraphs 11, 12, 13, etc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm happy just to take questions, but I just note the heading for number 13 should be Waikato means business rather than Waikato plan. So apologies, it's on there twice. So number 13 is Waikato means business. Happy to take any questions on the various collaborative initiatives.
So that's the Mayoral Forum, Waikato means business, UNISA and the Waikato plan.
Correct.
Going over to paragraph 15. Any questions on any of them? Haven't got anyone on the list. Sorry.
Haven't we got a separate item on future-proof, haven't we?
Yes,
later?
It doesn't include future-proof at all, Paula.
Okay, so the Mayoral Forum. Just in respect to that, I guess at the appropriate time we will get a synopsis of the conversations at the Mayoral Forum around some of the regional growth assets. And just like some feedback on how they're feeling about that. And that's not just the theatre, which we'll be negotiating with the councils to contribute. It's also things like the regional sports facility plan and also the regional arts, I've forgotten the title of that, the regional community arts plan.
Yes.
I just would really value some feedback of what the discussion is at the Mayoral Forum around those things.
I can summarise if you'd like, Chair. So obviously the theatre will be a conversation through the LTP, so I won't talk about that today. But a framework has been agreed by the Mayoral Forum and has been promoted to each council in terms of how conversations and business cases will be considered for regional or sub-regional facilities or assets or services. So theatres, indoor recreation centres, sports facilities, etc. So that framework has now been promulgated and is now with each council to work through. So that is now in place, and obviously the first candidate project being discussed through that is the Waikato Regional Theatre.
So which is great. Has there been any other economic development, because that regional economic fund that this regional council has is for changing the world as far as the economy goes. Is there any discussion at the Mayoral Forum around some of those things that had started when I was on that forum, which was around things like regional growth facilities, whether that be an add-on value in forestry or aquaculture or whatever? And the only reason I'm asking this, someone will say, well, what's that got to do with Hamilton? Of course it does, because it's one fund and it's got to fund many things. So whatever else is in the mix is a competitor for the same fund.
Sure. Kelvin's going to...
So from the Waikato means business end, there's a paper coming in the next couple of days as part of the 10-year plan proposals as they presented to us. And those questions around what the strategy and what the projects are not yet determined, apart from those that are identified within any of the Mayoral Forums. But certainly that is the intent, and will be one of the first action points that new board or the new body will put together and focus on exactly those types of activities that you are outlining.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Paula. I had a question in relation to this Waikato means business under the first bullet point of that, Blair, the work to establish the Waikato Regional Economic Development Agency and the commissioning an external program manager for the Waikato story. What's the sort of cost of that to this council? I mean, is anything being factored into the LTP proposed for that, or is this sort of an outlier?
Two separate things, Mr. Chair. The first one, the progression work to establish, has been going on. They presented to a briefing to us. They came to us in September, I think it was, and there's a report coming back tomorrow with their presentation as to answering some questions I think were put up around the makeup of the board, the organisation, how that would be done, and then that currently is an unfunded project or proposal to be considered within the LTP alongside everything else as per the resolution. So that's the first one. Does that answer that? And then the second point, commissioning an external program manager, that's within their existing budgets now to develop the economic story, and that has been done within... That's in our existing... No, sorry, within the Waikato Means Business project budgets as it stands now. So that's happening within their existing budget, doesn't come from us. Okay. Yeah. Is there being presented alongside the Economic Development Agency proposal the current spend by us as a council in that area? Yes, we can bring that forward. It was in the last report we put forward, but we don't do a lot in that area because it's a culmination of a number of, like the DC group that put together, for example, this report around the... But so we can... culmination, but it's not... It's around $50,000 to $60,000. We'd be able to tell how much extra we could be up for if that went ahead. Correct. Yep. Correct. Thanks. Any other questions? If not, sorry.
One question of a general nature, and that's around paragraph 34 on financial considerations. I just wonder if that statement that's in there is misleading. I know that this is a report for information purposes, but there are financial implications in almost every one of the items in the report, and I know that they will be reported back through, or potentially through, separate forums. But I'm just a little bit concerned if you take that reading on its own, it suggests that there are no financial... so I just wonder if in future the wording could be changed to something like this report is for information purposes only. Any financial implications will be reported back at the appropriate forum. Otherwise, this report on its own will be incorrect if you take that. I think you're right there. Yeah. It could occasionally be direct financial implications if part of it, for instance, when Thomas Road had asked us to do a piece of work, then there would have been. Yeah, but even Waikato Means Business suggests securing external funding to progress the 2017-18, which you've already had questions on. Yeah. There are financial implications around that. Yeah, no, I think everyone... And so it's really a matter of getting the wording, just tidying up that wording there. There were a lot of nods around the table when you were asking that. Okay. So I think if we can clarify that part of it and make it quite specific, if there are any direct ones, that they should be specified in a resolution, actually. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, Blair.
Just one final comment through the chair. Not on today's agenda, but for next week, there'll be a report coming forward on the Waters Collaborative project with Waipa District Council. So that will be on the agenda for the 12th, and so it's not mentioned here, but it will be covered in a report to the council on the 12th in terms of a proposal around the Shared Waters Management Company. So that's the other relevant regional initiative at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Now, we've got one resolution that the report be received. If we're going to I'll move it and seconder for that. Rob, thanks. Those in favour, against, carried unanimously, thanks. We're on to the speed limit bylaw with Robin, number 11. That's on page 71, thanks. This is a very long report in terms of pages, but maybe not so. We've had it about 3 times. I think this is about the third time.
Yes.
Robin, over to you.
So good afternoon, councillors. So the purpose of being here today really is to report back on the outcome of the consultation that's been undertaken for proposed speed limit changes that were first proposed at this committee in March 2017 and from the hearings that were held on the 1st of November. The proposed changes are detailed in clause 20, and I will take the report as being read, just noting that we have one item that's a little unusual in the fact that Rotokauri Road is also going through a speed limit change process with Waikato District, and there may be a change occur between this meeting and the full council, and so we've just highlighted that may change, and we'll just need to update our bylaw to incorporate that for the 14th of December meeting.
Right, thanks. Angela, as the chair of the hearings committee, did you want to say anything about that aspect of it?
Not really. We only had
one.
Yeah, we only had one person show up to speak for the public, so all went pretty smoothly, really. Yep, can't add anything else.
Okay, questions on the report? If not, we'll moved by James, and the motion is all of the number 5, which includes all of those boxes up to page 75, with the notes B and C underneath on the last 2 pages. So that's a long resolution there, but it needs to be done for legal reasons. So it's been moved by James and seconded by Mark. Got in before you, Siggy, sorry. And any discussion on that? If not, I'll put the resolution, show of hands. Sorry, you do want a discussion?
Yeah, well, just a quick clarification.
It's always handy to use that, I would.
Yeah, this is all decisions within the right of this committee?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, we've been given delegated authority in this area. Yep. Okay, so I'll put the resolution. Those in favour, show of hands. Those against, that's carried unanimously. Thanks. So, councillors, we're on to the water and wastewater treatment plant upgrade project update. Andrew Parsons is giving that, and that's on page 133. And over to you, Andrew.
Good morning, councillors.
It's afternoon now.
Is it? Oh, I'm behind the times. Hey, look, I'll largely take the report as read. I just wanted to draw attention to some key matters. So whilst this report's about the 2 treatment plant upgrades, the recommendation being sought is to confirm the scope simply for the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. But the reason for reporting these 2 projects together is because they're actually integrated in delivery for operational and resilience reasons. So we're managing them as a combined project. There was a business case that was presented to council back in 2015 for this project, and there's been quite a comprehensive investigation since the adoption of that business case. And that's looked at the performance of the plant. It's also looked at the performance of the plant, recognising the recent growth over the last few years and what's likely moving forward, particularly for residential and industry. And they also looked at that assessment through the lens of the discharge consent that the City Council holds, because you know the wastewater ultimately leaves the plant and enters the Waikato River. So we've got some really tough consent conditions that we have to adhere to there as well. And if there's any technical questions on that, I've got my reporter behind me to take those challenging questions. The most important parameter for the upgrade of this project is the removal of nitrogen. And I won't go into any of the detail unless there's specific questions on that, but nitrogen's been identified as important both nationally through national policy statements on fresh water and through healthy rivers. And plus, from a growth perspective, the increased residential load and industry load has a requirement to deal with nitrogen. And then I guess the last component to keep in mind is seismic policy and our improved understanding of seismic resilience for key infrastructure. So that sits all behind this project. As a result of those investigations, we reset our expected costs in paragraph 35 in a coloured table, and I'm happy to take questions on that if people want to go there. But these estimates have been developed both through the investigation phase, but also looking at current industry pricing on other contracts that we've been letting as a city. I do note, though, that all this information has been reflected into the 2018 LTP process that Council will be debating later this week. In another key component in this is we're proposing a deferral of the water treatment plant upgrade by a couple of years as well, just in terms of managing workload, but also based on priority need. Our view is the nitrogen in the wastewater discharge is the priority need, not the capacity at the water treatment plant. And just following Council's approach over the last few LTPs, which is a just-in-time investment to infrastructure, we think there's scope to defer the water treatment plant upgrade by a few years. But that'll be informed based on the performance of the Rotatuna Reservoir over summer and a new dedicated pipe that we've almost completed between the water treatment plant and the Hamilton South Reservoir, and then of course community demand over the summer period. So if I just come back to the recommendation of the report, so we're looking for scope approval for the wastewater treatment plant, that we've already started a procurement process and we've got to the point of shortlisting preferred contractors. So if the committee today approves this scope, we'll be in a position to get formal pricing back from contractors and in early 2018 come back to council to seek a formal decision with the knowledge of actual prices to make a decision to whether to commit to the works or not. So with that introduction, I'll hand over to the chair.
Andrew, what I was just discussing with Chris was actually the second part of the recommendation, approve the macro scope of the upgrade. Macro scope doesn't really mean anything to, I don't know what exactly where it would be approving if we approve the macro scope. I mean, the resolution should be a bit more specific, I would have thought, or to say we approve within this range or these items to go within the work. Or
yes, so the items are set out in paragraph 26. So I could probably have done better with the wording. Macro scope is intended to just be the high level scope because it's quite technical, this upgrade, but the items that would be part of the scope are set out in page 26. Paragraph 26. Which is essentially a pump station within the plant from a primary process to the secondary process, aeration basins, clarifiers, so that's all to do with denitrification. And then there's some other associated investments around the chemicals to support the new process, energy supply, etc. So the high-level scope set out on 26, but happy to take questions.
So if we said something like we approve the project to incorporate the elements set out in paragraph 26 of the report.
Yes, I'd be very happy.
But the other aspect of that, is there a budget range or upper limit? Because I think that should probably be stated, shouldn't it?
Yes, we can do that if you wish. Paragraph 35, the table there shows our current estimates. So towards the bottom, the brown section has the estimate for the wastewater treatment plant upgrade at $25.707 million. We can use that figure if you wish, but from my perspective, the price that really counts is the price that comes in through the tender box after Christmas if council chooses to proceed.
We usually improve projects to go out for tender with an expected range specified, I think.
I would be happy with the figure in this report at $25.707 million.
If we said that in the resolution, so it said approve the scope of the wastewater treatment plant upgrade project to incorporate the elements set out in 26.
Yes.
Paragraph 26 to the value of 25.707 million.
Yes.
I just think that's a bit more specific. And if it's significant variation, you will come back.
The whole thing's going to come back to council anyway. So yeah. But I'm very happy with those amendments.
So can we change the wording of that, Amy? Or just to get it more specific. Sorry, we've got Rob.
Yes, Chair. Look, I think this is a good example of hopefully where we might land with the LTP discussions. As I see it, this project includes both renewals and improvements. And I'm just wondering whether we shouldn't be starting to consider what portion of the contract is renewals, because it will come out of its own renewal pot, and what is in fact improvements, so that we've got a little bit of an overview in terms of what's being replaced because it's worn out, and what what is the kind of upgrade, the upgrade portion?
Because we will be coming back to council network, I can make that very clear for you in that report.
I'd like that in the report, and I think it should be assuming where we might land in the next few days. That may become what I like to see a regular feature in our reports.
For any of these capital works.
For any of these which involve, like Waterworld, involve a certain amount of renewal and a certain amount of improvement or upgrade.
Yep. So you're happy that the management take that on board for future reports?
Yeah, and I think that Andrew has indicated that that's possible to do that in this case too.
Most definitely, yes.
Yeah. So the staff recommendation with that rewording of B is there up on the board now, and I'll move that, and it's seconded by Siggy this time.
Sorry, if I may. It should be paragraph 26, not 22.
Yes, correct. Thanks, Amy.
There are some commas missing in your 25 million too.
Yes, there's an extra zero. No, there's a was it a comma between the 7 and the first 0?
Correct.
Yep. Okay, does that work out all right, Andrew? Is that
yes?
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, I'll put that show of hands. Those in favour, against, carried. Thanks unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew.
Thank you.
So we're on to the other treatment plant seismic strengthening update, and we've got Bridget. Oh, Myri and Bridget. That's on page 142.
Afternoon,
over to you, Bridget.
Thank you. Afternoon, councillors. I'm Bridget Morgan. I'm the Waters Asset Manager for the Infrastructure Group. Part of my responsibilities are to ensure that our assets are up to standard in terms of legislation and policy, and that's my purpose for being here today to present this report. I'm joined by my reporter, who has overarching responsibility in her role as the Waters unit manager. Also in the audience we have Corey Lang and Paul Gower, who are here to respond to any questions about the Building Act or the seismic policy should they arise. I'll take the report as read and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Rob first. Thanks.
I assume that this work and the costing that you've got for this work will bring the building up to seismic strength of 34%?
Yes, that is correct.
Have we considered a better than 34? You know, have we considered the options around improving the seismic strengthening beyond 34 and maybe up to what a new build strengthening would be, and the relevant costs for that?
We are still to consider the long-term response to particularly the wastewater treatment plant admin building. There are a number of renewal opportunities to combine works, so at that point in time we will consider whether it's worth upgrading that building.
But beyond the 34%?
Beyond the 34,
okay.
yeah.
So will you report back to us in terms of having a costing which says this is what it will cost us to strengthen to 34%, this is what it might cost to do 67%, and this is what it might cost to do a new build, which would be, I assume, 100%?
We had anticipated through the LTP discussions that we will be talking about a long-term solution for that building.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Are there any other questions? If not, we're going to move to the recommendation, which I'll move, A and B, item 3, seconded by, got a seconder, Mark got in there, thanks, Mark Bunting. So I'll put that resolution, if there's no speakers. No. Those in favour raise their hands. Against? Thanks, that's carried unanimously. Thanks very much. That wasn't so bad, Bridget.
Thank you.
Councillors, because there's 3 future-proof items, listed here, 18, 14 and 15, and one of the key staff members or contractors responsible for Future Proof isn't available until 1:30. I'm putting them all on immediately after lunch at 1:30. Like I said, I'd hoped, Angela, it actually worked out like this, which is a change. And going straight to item 16, which Kelvin has just been given a 60-second warning that he would, and that's on 204, page 204 that is. I'll just flick to that.
Yep.
So, Kelvin, do you want to say whatever you need to introduce that?
Yep,
I know
sure.
Greg's been called, but isn't here yet.
He may not get here. I'm not sure what his movements are. So, councillors, this is our usual quarterly development contributions remissions for the first quarter of 2018. So we do bring this to show you just the amounts. It's our usual report. There is a PX issue that we have also with DX later on in the afternoon. But these are our ones that we have brought forward into the public arena so that everyone is transparent on the numbers.
Okay, Gary, thanks.
Thank you. Just to be quite clear what this means, so for example, if you go to page 205, there's a big green part of that circle and it says $500,000.
Yep.
So given our development contributions policy,
yes,
we have, rather than charging someone and I'll be a bit clumsy with my wording here, the full fee, a number of developers or some number of developers, one or more, have managed to not pay our policy fee, which would have been $520,000 greater, because they had an alternative solution.
That could be one of the reasons, yes. Or the demand is modelled. They've now shown us evidence, whether it's a solution or other evidence of use, that therefore they don't put that demand on the network, and therefore there's a reduction, a composite reduction.
So the City Council's not quote unquote giving anything away. We are maintaining the same level of service, amenity, safety, all those sort of things, and these developers are managing to save $500,000.
So
which is a good outcome.
So that is correct in that case, but there's also some of that would also be from the CBD remissions as well, which
okay.
So there's that as well. So on point 3 on page 204, 3 types of remissions: correct. Actual demand, so that's the one we've just discussed around evidence or solution; the private development agreements where someone may have paid for some infrastructure development themselves in advance, and we've remitted that back over time; or a CBD remission where that is current policy that there is no.
So that's the only situation where we may be putting ourselves at risk. So the previous councils, and this council has continued it on so far, has said that we want to encourage growth in the CBD. One of the ways we can do that is reducing development or negating development contributions in the CBD. So in that situation, we're somewhat at risk that people have done developments which might increase our stormwater exposure, but we haven't collected any money from anyone in the CBD for those.
Yes, well, I mean, you're quite correct. But I think it was the last report we did on this. We brought back the total amount of emissions that have been put within the CBD over the last. I think it was back from 2013. Don't quote me on that, but I know we did bring those numbers, and I think they were only around the $2 million mark for that whole period that there's been DC emissions. So the risk is not high, and as you're all aware, there is a proposal to remove that from the current policy.
Okay, and just to be clear, this is a quarterly report, isn't it? So we could, that's right, quarterly.
Yes,
so the stormwater ones annualised would be about $2 million. If it was, that's a bad thing.
It's hard to annualise it on that basis because they come so lumpy. Yeah. So you may well get a next quarter where there is nil, or depending on the development and what's happening. Yeah, correct.
Okay. No, thank you, Kellen.
Thanks. Are there any other questions in relation to this item? If not, I'll move that we receive the report, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All those in favour, raise their hands. Against? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. There isn't anything else to do before Future Proof, so with your permission, we'll look to come back just before 1:30 and start right on 1:30 with the future-proof. Yep, that's right. With 18, 14 and 15 in that order. Yeah, well, the agenda is sort of, because the key staff member from future-proof isn't available to be here until 1:30. Otherwise, I would have said 1:15 or something. Oh, sorry. Now, hang on. You go, Leanne.
And councillors, just to remind you that Brendan, oh no, you can stand 2 seconds. Brendan will be in the councillors' tea room during the lunch break. If any of you have got any questions or comments to make about elected member remuneration submission that we are bringing a report to the next council meeting on, this is kind of last chance to have your say. Thank you.
Sorry, I nearly forgot.
Thank you.